OCI Solar Power is a development company, but we're majority owned by OCI, which is one of the world's leading manufacturers of polysilicon. So what I really want to share with you today is a little bit about the OCI family of companies, but also a viewpoint really from start to finish. And that's start to finish of the value chain, not start to finish of our industry. I don't think our industry is at a finish. We're actually, as has been said, very much at the beginning. But I do have a perspective and fortunate enough to spend a lot of time on the manufacturing side as well, which provides, I think, a pretty thorough perspective of manufacturing all the way through development. So OCI is headquartered in Seoul, South Korea. There are really three major polysilicon manufacturers. And polysilicon is the primary ingredient or material that goes into crystalline silicon. And there are lots of players in the market, but there's really three dominant ones, Hemlock and Wacker are the other two that you may have heard of. And a lot of times you never even hear of those, the very back end of the value chain. I'm sure the module manufacturers and cell manufacturers know those companies well. But if you're someone consuming electricity or a utility entering into a power purchase agreement or a developer building a power plant, a lot of times you never deal with the very back end of the value chain. But in our industry, it's critically important because that's where a lot of the both cost and quality of the ultimate solar panel start. And if cost and quality aren't in place in the very beginning of the value chain, you can never make up for it through the rest of the processes. You can undo quality and cost along the way, but you can't make up for not having it at the very first step, which is the polysilicon. And so OCI, when they set out to enter the polysilicon market, they focused on cost and quality, and I think you heard JA Solar mention those as well. Quality and cost are what makes manufacturers in the value chain competitive. And in the polysilicon world, they talk about the number of nines, which is essentially 99 point and then how many nines you have after that in terms of how pure your polysilicon is. And that really determines how good of a solar panel you'll have sitting on a rooftop or on land somewhere. So the industry right now and where OCI is at 11 nines, which is 99 point and then 9 nines of purity on the polysilicon. So that requires a significant amount of capital investment. As Jonathan mentioned, it does take time for the value chain to actually spend that much money, get their processes in place, and get their quality in place. So there is a natural growth cycle on these very capital-intensive portions of the value chain. OCI has continued to expand its manufacturing capacity for polysilicon. As of now, the next two plants will also be located in Korea. OCI will then be the largest manufacturer of polysilicon, or is scheduled to be, barring some acquisitions or mergers by other companies. As OCI was looking at the renewables industry, though, they wanted to participate in it more than just on the very back end of making polysilicon. And about 3 years ago, they started assessing where else they would like to participate in the global renewables business. And one decision they made was to not compete against their customers. So after you make polysilicon, you make ingots and wafers. Essentially, you take the polysilicon, slice it up, that gets made into cells, into modules, that eventually get installed into a power plant. So in order to not compete against their own customers, OCI decided to participate by getting into development, both in Korea and in the United States. They are now involved in solar development. In addition, OCI is looking at other sort of ancillary technologies that are related to renewables. So we're looking at storage, and that's somewhat ancillary, although as the industry grows, it's going to be directly linked to solar power and the success of solar power. And insulation is another area where OCI has spent a lot of time building businesses. So OCI is building a renewables business, polysilicon, and then other technologies and solar development. I am part of the OCI Solar Power Company. Earlier this year, OCI acquired majority share of a company called Cornerstone Power Development, which is a team of developers that have been together for about 20 years developing power plants in the United States, including fossil plants, biomass plants, wind, and now solar. We're headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. We have about 280 megawatts under development, which if you look at the map, you'll see that our projects, we have a lot of projects for those 280 megawatts. And one of the reasons is we started in the Northeast. The Northeast market is somewhat different than the original Southwest market insofar as you tended to build smaller power projects very close to where the power is consumed and put them on distribution lines. So 2 to 20 megawatts is a typical size for a variety of reasons in the Northeast. Now the Southwest market has started moving toward that model as well. Rather than just large projects that have to ship power into California, the states in the Southwest are starting to also combine the large projects with smaller projects on distribution lines as well. And that's why OCI Solar Power is now focused also on the Southwest market. So where are we in the industry? Feed-in tariffs got the party started. That was what started the gold rush, as it is sometimes called. And it's not just on the manufacturing side, but also on the developer side. It was a significant amount of capital that was injected into feed-in tariffs that then flowed back into the entire value chain. And it was a necessary way to start the industry. The back end of this value chain is incredibly capital intensive, anywhere from $250 million to $1 billion of investment required. That investment doesn't get made unless there's a secure revenue stream through the value chain. So the feed-in tariffs created a secure source of revenue and also drove demand through the value chain. It also made it attractive for hundreds and hundreds of participants to enter at all portions of the value chain. For example, the ingot and wafer stage of the value chain, I've heard over 200 ingot and wafer manufacturers in China alone. And what they say is, everyone that owned a karaoke bar now owns an ingot wafer manufacturer. In the United States, on the development end, it seems like every real estate agent is suddenly a solar developer. So it happened at every stage of the value chain, and it was driven by feed-in tariffs. And countries such as Germany, Italy, Spain helped to lead the charge into solar. And you can speculate whether that was the right thing for them to do from a policy perspective. They certainly have a significant amount of solar power, and they certainly got some significant job creation out of it. One thing that people don't realize is, I think a lot of times, that a lot of the components in solar projects don't come from China. The inverters, the trackers, the balance of system, a lot of the engineering and soft costs. A lot of those, the expertise lies in Europe, and it's because they invested in that. So when you say the modules are coming from China, that is true. Some of the components, the cells, are manufactured in China, but even the polysilicon tends to be made in Korea and outside of China, and all the other components of the power plant are made elsewhere. So Europe got the party started, and the question is, can prices remain that high? Not just for the electricity that's being purchased, but for everyone in the value chain. And the answer is no. Prices will fall. And how grave is the situation? I think it's not grave at all. It's good news for the industry. We needed the prices in the industry. The fall in prices is reflective of two things. One, we have enough supply now for demand, and some of that's, we're always going to have disconnects between supply and demand. Anytime we have a capital-intensive industry on the back end of the supply chain, we'll never be quite matched up, especially when demand is driven by regulation. So we'll always have some anomalies, but the price we should fluctuate around is much more today's pricing than last year's pricing. And it's not just solar panels. If you go talk to a tracker manufacturer, if you talk to an inverter manufacturer, if you talk to a wire harness manufacturer, all of them now are selling products and entering into contracts at prices that I would consider sustainable. So if you take the industry value chain and the raw materials that go into it, the conversion cost of converting that, the cost of servicing your debt, providing a return on your equity for each stage in the value chain, and add on a profit margin and risk adjusted. That's where pricing is today. So we're not in a wild free fall. We're in a correction. It's not even a correction, it's a natural stage of evolution. Prices should have started where they did, and they should be heading toward where they are. But it's not a wild free fall or free fall. So the pricing structure is actually at a very good point in this industry for the industry as a whole. It will create stability, which will be good for the industry. And there will be significant consolidation. That's one thing that will happen at every stage, from the polysilicon manufacturers, but especially as you move beyond that to ingot and wafers, cells and modules, and development. And trackers and inverters will see the same thing, and EPC firms. There will be some natural consolidation. So the question is, with all the free fall in prices, why has the last year not been very fun for U.S. developers? As has been mentioned, the solar market is China, India, and the U.S. are going to drive the growth. So what's going on in the U.S.? And we've heard examples of plants that have been built here in Nevada. But when you start talking about a 70 megawatt plant, a 400 megawatt plant, that really doesn't add up very fast for the industry. And the market in the U.S. has actually been very difficult if you would talk to most developers. There are successes here and there along the way, but the development market has also had a shakeout. Getting supply and demand to balance in each state is also very difficult. But there's been significant uncertainty created. And these two graphs here are what are called SREC prices. In the Northeast, the way you get your revenue is by basically selling your renewable credits. And in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, the market has fallen. And it's fallen to a point where the projects aren't feasible, actually. So these prices aren't sustainable. They'll rebound. But there's been a slight bit of overbuild, but mainly it's the uncertainty right now due to this significant drop in pricing. You have a lot of people questioning which businesses, which companies will survive. Is my 5-year warranty, is my 10-year warranty any good if that manufacturer is not around in several years? You have utilities like Detroit Edison, Kansas City Power and Light that canceled their solar RFPs. And some of that's due to them wanting to see what happens with pricing. Is it going to keep falling? Is now the right time to build? So this period of uncertainty has created what I would call a slowdown in development in the United States. But it's a natural adjustment of the market. And as the uncertainty goes away, we'll continue to see additional growth and significant growth in the U.S. So, how shovel-ready is the U.S. market? And for a lot of developers, it's exactly this shovel-ready. They're going out of business, and so are other people in the supply chain. But I think the positive news that's the opposite of this cartoon is that the U.S. is actually very shovel-ready. With the prices where they are right now, we've talked about grid parity, but you have some other factors that come into play right now. And we do have the grant that's still in existence, but the tax credit's around till 2016, which helps to make projects attractive. We have continued low land prices, which is a major component of any solar project. The cost of capital right now, if you can find someone to lend to you, is very low. The cost of interconnection is still what I would consider relatively low. So as more and more projects get built, there's costs that are going to go up. So the cost of interconnection will certainly go up because the best spots should get taken first if developers know what they're doing. And as the economy rebounds, the cost of land and the cost of capital are going to go up. And prices will continue on equipment will continue to improve somewhat just through incremental improvements in manufacturing and improvements in efficiency of technologies. But the combination we have right now of all the costs in development and the cost of the supply chain might make the next few years the most attractive years to build in the United States. So it's this sit and wait for prices to continue to fall, which you sometimes read about, is actually it's not actually the right way to be thinking about our industry. It's a super attractive time to be building if you're a developer. So, why be bullish? As I said, it is an attractive time to build, and it sounds like all the panelists up here are rather bullish on our industry. Probably most people in this room are bullish on the industry, or you wouldn't be here. But demand is growing in the United States. This is a common map that you may have seen that's provided by the Department of Energy. But demand is growing. We're seeing additional states starting to pass requirements. Rhode Island has recently passed a requirement. They were one of the last states in the Northeast to climate board. New York is considering legislation that would make them probably the largest state in the United States other than California. Texas and Pennsylvania are considering changes to their regulations that would make them, again, high growth markets. And the other thing to remember is a lot of the requirements are based on total percent of electricity consumption. As our economy grows, electricity consumption goes up, and that creates even more and more demand for solar power. So, so economic development and solar power consumption go hand in hand. And as we've already talked about, grid parity is on its way. I can't read this chart. I pulled it off the internet. It's in Korean, so it's, I guess, an homage to my parent company. But the important thing on a grid parity graph, and you hear the term, you see these graphs, and basically it's two axes and a line, and then there's a point where a line crosses another one or has a dot put on it. But it's not really the exact number where that happens. The important thing to understand is why that's going to happen. The equipment prices have fallen. That helps a lot. There's no doubt about that. But also in this country, the cost of other technologies continues to go up due to environmental regulations. We're retiring a significant number of plants, coal plants for example, and other plants are just difficult to build and have a tremendously long lead time. So if the capacity for new technologies isn't already in the interconnection queue, for example, the permitting queue, for example, it takes years to come online. And before the economic crash in this country, a lot of regions of the United States were actually approaching what is called their reserve margin, which means as a utility, you have to have enough capacity and a buffer. Well, a lot of regions in the United States were approaching that buffer, which means even without renewables, several regions were going to have to build new power plants. And as the economy comes back and continues to grow, the approaching where we actually need more power, no matter what kind it is, will continue to increase the pressure on utilities to purchase power. And renewables is one of the fastest things to build, and as costs continue to come down, it can compete head-to-head in the Southwest, and actually in very high-priced locations in the Northeast. We're already approaching grid parity. And solar power and economic recovery and economic development do go hand in hand. And, as I said, our development team's been in power development for 20 years, and I've never encountered a technology that actually works as tightly with the local community as solar power. And I think that's part of the purpose to be here today. But technologies can compete. We can manufacture the equipment right here in the United States. The equipment can be put in smaller factories and locations. Inverters and trackers are already largely manufactured in Europe. The United States can compete with that. A lot of the back end of the supply chain is very electricity intensive, and ironically enough, the United States has low cost electricity. You may not think that when you get your electricity bill every month, but for the level of reliability we have, our electricity is relatively cheap. So portions of the supply chain, even if we can't compete on labor head-to-head, we're not wildly off if we automate some of our plants, but our cost of electricity can be a lot more attractive and a lot more reliable. So for Asian countries to get the level of reliability they need in electricity, they actually have to do tremendous upgrades just to manufacture solar panels. So they do go hand in hand, solar power and economic recovery. And as I said, as we continue to recover as an economy, that increases the percent of requirement for solar the way a lot of the mandates are written. So what does that mean for a manufacturer or a developer. And I think a lot of the implications are the same. 2012 is going to be a rough year. I think most of the manufacturers would tell you that, and developers might tell you that. You have to have cash on hand, or you probably are going to have trouble surviving the next 12 months. And that's what we're seeing all through the supply chain. But once you get through that, it does come down to cost and quality. And whether you're a developer or you're making the polysilicon, cost and quality and value matter. Taking a long-term view of the market matters. So people jumping into certain aspects of the industry with a short-term view, I mean, the power development is difficult. It takes time. There's uncertainty. So you have to be willing to go into development understanding that it could take multiple years. In addition, close collaboration with communities is critical. And it's not just from the economic development viewpoint and the manufacturing viewpoint, but a lot of solar plants, as much as they're more welcomed by communities, they tend to sit a lot closer to communities. They sit next door to houses. They sit right next to the highway. They're very visible. And that's one of the huge advantages solar has, is you can locate it next to where the power is used in a lot of instances. So taking a collaborative mindset and a partnership approach is very important. Whether you're the developer bringing together a lot of partners to keep costs low, or bringing together partners to work with the community for the taxes you need, for the kind of labor you need, both the construction labor but the manufacturing labor. Taking a collaborative approach is very important, I think, for everyone in the value chain if they're going to be successful in this business. And that's what OCI and OCI Solar Power are interested in doing in Nevada. And I talked to a couple people last night about this, but what Nevada's trying to do, other places have talked about it. It's something that a few other states are thinking about, or communities, but no one has pulled it off yet. It's not easy. It requires the public and private sector working together. It requires a lot of manufacturers working together. It requires the utilities working together. And that manufacturing base that can be built by doing something like what the summit's trying to achieve, I think, it can exist in more than one location in the United States. It could probably exist in 6 to 10 locations, but it can't exist everywhere. So moving quickly and intelligently and in the right structure is very important. And so hopefully over the next couple of days, the people here can help to come up with ideas and solutions to help Nevada move forward. Appreciate your time. I look forward to meeting all of you better over the next couple of days.